Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. It's a quick turnaround here, so we have my Game Week 23 team selection today, and I'm going to discuss whether I'm going to be bringing in Erling Haaland with my 2 free transfers. If you do enjoy today's video and you get any value out of it, please do remember to smash that like button, make sure to subscribe as well, but without further ado, let's jump into it. So guys, I'm recording this after the games on Wednesday evening just to timestamp it. So that means that I don't yet know the results from Thursday. But as of right now, I'm on a small green arrow with Areola left to play. I would imagine that arrow gets much smaller because I don't own Bowen or Solanke, and I expect both of them could return. And it therefore could either be a small green or I would imagine a small red. So all in all, I haven't gained much, but I probably haven't lost much this week. I would love to know down below in the comments, how many points do you have for Game Week 22? So, let's very briefly talk about it. The defence continues to be an absolute disaster for me. This week, I did manage to get 3 players playing, but of course, Trent didn't start. Connor Bradley was absolutely unbelievable. And there's chatter about whether he'll keep Trent out the team. I don't think for a second Bradley will keep Trent out the team. But will Bradley be playing at right back? And might that finally push Trent into midfield? Absolutely, because that boy can defend, he can attack. He was whipping in crosses for fun, and he just looked very, very assured on that pitch. So, we may finally see Trent starting in a midfield role, potentially, given how well Bradley's playing. But from an FPL perspective, obviously, not great that he came on late. And to be honest, he made a few runs, but he was generally playing very, very deep, almost like a central defensive midfielder. So 1 point from Trent was better than 0 points. But again, the entire defence was rubbish. Porro 1-pointer. Arsenal conceded late, which, to be honest, given the fact that a lot of people own Gabriel and Saliba, and you've got Raya and you've got Zinchenko, it didn't really affect me too much that Arsenal conceded, but it would have been nice to at least get some points from my defence. So all in all, very disappointing. We, of course, knew that Pau Torres wouldn't feature in 22, and Charlie Taylor also wasn't in the squad. So I'm left in a position where I've got 3 defenders that I don't mind, but don't have the best fixture for Game Week 23, and obviously 2 defenders that look like they're not going to be playing anytime soon. So the defence is certainly not in a good position. Hopefully Areola can get a clean sheet against Bournemouth, but I'm not particularly hopeful. The midfield was a little bit better, actually. 3 of the midfielders returned, with 2 of them getting goals. So Saka 10-pointer, Richarlison 7-pointer, which became 14 points with captain. Foden got a single assist and obviously also the clean sheet point. And then Palmer was the only one to blank. But given the fixture, that was kind of a little bit expected anyway. It was really nice to see Taka return. It's a shame that he couldn't do that last week when we captained him. But it just goes to show if a player does have good underlying data on a consistent basis, they usually start to perform at some point. And Saka looked a little bit higher up the pitch. He looked a little bit more central. And he finally converted some of that expected data that we've been talking about. And it kind of is a bit of a learning lesson. But it's not always the case that it goes this way. But sometimes you've just got to be a little bit patient with players. If the player is putting up good data and they are traditionally a good player that can return quite a few goals and assists or points in FPL, then over time, as long as you give them a few game weeks, they tend to start doing so. And I feel like Saka and Watkins is a really good example of that, because we have been looking at removing both of them. I myself have been saying to bring in Haaland, I might have to remove Saka, I might have to remove Watkins, and we'll discuss that later on in the video. But this just goes to show that they are class assets that will continue to return for you. So it's very difficult to take them out. For the front line, Watkins getting the goal was great, although Villa continue to look a shadow of their former self from earlier on in the season. They are kind of struggling at the moment, whether that be home, whether that be away. It doesn't really matter who the opposition is, and that's not to discredit Newcastle. They were much, much better in that game. But Aston Villa are just going through a spell at the moment where they're struggling, but they do have really nice fixtures coming up. So it's a bit of a tricky one to decide what to do around Aston Villa. Obviously, when we know whether they blank in 29 or not, that might help us a little bit, because if they blank in 29, you're looking at it and thinking the fixtures might be okay, but there's a drop in form from the team. They're going to blank in the biggest blank of the season. Maybe we start to think about offloading our Villa players. Alvarez was the star performer in my team. I called this completely wrong. I didn't really consider Alvarez captaincy because I thought his minutes would be the least secure, and he wasn't one of the ones that went off. We saw KDB go off, then we saw Foden go off, and Alvarez was just staying on the pitch. He obviously got both of his goals in the first half. To come away with a brace is absolutely brilliant. And again, we're now left in a position, which we'll discuss a bit later, it's going to be very hard to drop him because the performances have started to improve recently. He played incredibly well, obviously, in this game. And you just think, are KDB and Haaland going to play enough minutes? Are they going to start every game? And if they're not, Alvarez is going to be the one starting. And if he can continue that level of output, then maybe he's worth keeping for double game week 25. But really nice to get 13 points from him. And then we'll just finish off with Darwin. I mean, what on earth was that? Let me know down below if you own Darwin. I don't even know where to start. He set the record for the most times hitting the woodwork in a single game. He accumulated almost 1.8 XGI. Yes, he had a penalty, but that means he accumulated 1 XGI from open play as well. He's actually accumulated over 5 XGI in the last 3 games. I mean, he is just a chance magnet. It is actually remarkable the number of chances he gets. The frustrating thing is recently he's actually been starting to take some of those chances. He's looked a little bit more clinical, but this game it was just back to his old best of just missing everything he was given. He's definitely not going to be on penalties anymore. It did actually look like McAllister was going to take the penalty, and he sort of like pity-handed it to Darwin to take, and then Darwin obviously missed it, so I can't imagine Darwin's on penalties now. Even if Salah's out longer term, I think McAllister will likely take them, or maybe even like a Szoboszlai. But from a positive perspective, we were looking at silver lining. He is getting so many chances, and he looks very nailed on at the moment. Again, Darwin stayed on the pitch. We saw Jota go off. We saw Diaz go off. A lot of the other players went off. Szoboszlai went off. Gomez went off. Loads of players came off when Liverpool were winning comfortably, and Darwin stays on the pitch. So his minutes are very good at the moment. And if he continues to get those chances, he will convert the odd one here and there. So I still don't mind him as an option. But given the fact that we haven't had this double announced, which we're going to discuss later, given the fact he's missing chances, it makes him feel a little bit more dispensable. But at least he came away with positive points and didn't finish on -1 or -2. So that was the way Game Week 22 went for me. Like I said, I've still got Areola left to play. Let's say Areola gets 2 points. I'm going to finish with about 60 points. Probably a small green or a small red. Let me know down below how many points you got for Game Week 22. So moving on to Game Week 23, and I'm currently lining up in a 3-4-3 as I have been for a few weeks, because obviously I've still got Salah in my team. I've got 2.6 million in the bank, which isn't particularly flexible, but I do have 2 free transfers, which probably moves me back into a position where I am flexible. And the reason I don't have that much money in the bank is obviously I decided to hold on to both Trent and Salah, and I also still have a lot of other expensive players in my team, because my team value is actually okay. But the reason that I still feel fairly comfortable with that is I think with 2 free transfers, you're always pretty flexible, especially when I've got Trent, I've got Salah, I've got Saka and Watkins. I've got these players that I can sell any number of them. And even if I were to want to use like 4 transfers, that's only a -8 hit. If I want to use 3, and 3 transfers really you can restructure your team, it's only a -4. And that's why it feels so nice to have 2 free transfers, because I feel like I'm not forced into selling Salah if I don't want to. If I want to sell Trent instead, I can do that and then use another transfer for a -4 and sell a various number of players to get Haaland back in if I want to. So I feel like I am in a really flexible position, and we'll discuss today whether I want Haaland back in and how I think I plan on using the 2 free transfers this week. The team is currently rated at 91% according to Fantasy Football Hub, which has dropped slightly in recent weeks, and I'm not predicted to get many points at 55.8. So, starting with the goalkeepers, I've got Dubravka coming back in goal for Luton at home. Luton have been scoring goals, but we know that Luton are much better at home themselves, and we also know that Newcastle are much better at home, and therefore I think this is still a pretty good game for Dubravka. And in general, Newcastle did look a lot better against Aston Villa. They still conceded, yes, but I think they might, in this period now, especially given they don't have as many commitments in different competitions, and given the fact that they've had a bit of a rest recently, I wonder if we might just see Newcastle start to go on a slightly better run now. I'm not saying we'll see them return to how we saw them last season, but maybe we'll just see a slight improvement given the fixtures, and I just don't think it makes much sense. I know Manchester United haven't been great, and I'm recording this before their Game Week 22 games, so if they look really rubbish, maybe I'll consider it, but I just don't think starting Areola makes much sense here. So Dubravka comes back in, and I'm fairly hopeful of getting something against Luton at home. The back line's not in a good place at all. And it's not just due to having injuries, it's also the fixtures this week. But I hate my defence, like I really do. And I shouldn't, because I think a few of them are fine, and some of it has been out of my control. But we'll discuss it in general. Pedro Porro continues to be the one that I'm like, I don't really need to sell Porro at the moment. Yes, he blanks in 26, but he also plays in Game Week 29, which we spoke about. This is big blank game week in Game Week 29. And I'm just thinking, can I hold him through Game Week 26? Can he be one of the players I bench? Because he has a pretty good fixture in 29 and a confirmed fixture as well. And if I decide not to free hit in 29, Porro is going to be incredibly useful. This week, he's got Everton away. Everton have been very good defensively again recently. They've sort of gone up on this like run where they've defended really well, then really poorly, then really well. But they obviously kept a clean sheet in Game Week 22. I'm not expecting tons of goals in this game, but I am hopeful of maybe getting a clean sheet for Porro. So we'll wait and see on that one. But he's definitely not a big priority for me, at least in sort of Game Week 23, 24, maybe even 25. But going into that blank game week, I of course need to consider, is he a player that I want to sell? Because I won't be free hitting in blank game week 26. We've then got Trent and Gabriel playing against each other. This is a tricky one, right? Because I think there will be goals in this. I really do. But if I also told you it's going to be 0-0, would you be that surprised? We've seen it before with some of these big games. I mean, not as much of a big game because Man United are pretty rubbish, but Liverpool-Man United was 0-0. You kind of see it sometimes where they just almost cancel each other out. And we expect, given the fact that Liverpool have been attacking so well, and that obviously Arsenal go for it given they're at home, we're expecting loads of goals, but we maybe won't see that. The other point to note is Trent, if he starts, is incredibly attacking, right? So you've also got the attacking threat. So whilst on paper it looks a bit naff, and I've also got obviously attackers from Liverpool and Arsenal, which makes it look even worse, it's also one of those where it's difficult to predict. And sometimes the best situation here is you've got tons of players from Liverpool and Arsenal. You just play them all and just hope for a mad game where you get points from a lot of them. And it does sometimes happen. Let's say that it's 4-4 and Trent gets a goal, Gabriel gets a goal. You could see it happening. That is obviously the perfect dream scenario. But it's one of those where, yes, in an ideal world, I probably wouldn't play Gabriel, maybe, even though they're best defence in the league. Maybe I would want to play one of my other defenders if they were fit. But it's not the end of the world at the same time. Again, if I did have Pau Torres available, if Pau Torres suddenly makes a recovery for 23, then I would love to play him against Sheffield United away. And to some extent, Taylor against Fulham at home isn't a terrible fixture, but it's really that Pau Torres one. I mean, it was one of the reasons I brought him in. I brought him in for so many reasons. He had a really good fixture in the blank game week, all of these reasons, and I saw the weeks when my defenders had difficult fixtures, I knew I would want Pau Torres. So it is pretty frustrating. Just around whether I think I need to sell Pau Torres, like, I don't have a bench at the moment, which is a bit of a mess. If anyone misses out, I'm guaranteed 10 players. And it almost happened again in Game Week 22 because Trent almost didn't come off the bench and I would have had 10 players. So it's not ideal continuing to go without having a fourth defender. My issue is I don't want any of the defenders. They all carry their own issues. They're playing for a rubbish defence. They've got no attacking threat. They're too expensive. Or they blank in 26 or they are likely to blank in 29. There's a small chance that Pau Torres plays in 29. He's got a good fixture in blank game week 26 as well. And when he's back, Villa are a decent defence. So if he's out long term, he's going to have to be a player that I sell. But if it's one of those where he's back in training soon, I kind of feel like there's no need to sell him unless I get into a position where Trent is a rotation risk, or if I get into another position where Gabriel or Porro are injury doubts. But as things stand right now, I just don't know who I would even want to move to. I'm going to discuss defenders in the watch list section once we've looked at my whole team, but none of them stand out to me as being great. They all carry issues with them. And I'm just like, it feels like such a waste of a transfer at the moment. When I'm trying to sort out Haaland, there are loads of midfielders that I want. Like, what do I really want to make a transfer to, like, Pau Torres to Van Heck? It doesn't feel great to me. So that's why at the moment, the plan is to just rock with Porro, Trent and Gabriel for the foreseeable future and just hope that I can get some returns from them. So that's the defence. Not ideal, but it's okay. Let's move on to the midfield. So we're sort of in survival mode at the moment in FPL because we're waiting to decide, do we want to bring Haaland back in? We're waiting to try and work out what we need to do with Salah. And we're also waiting for double announcement in Game Week 25. Now, if you've been watching the content and sort of are quite engaged in FPL, you will have seen a lot of people talking about a double Game Week 25 for Liverpool. That still hasn't been announced, and it's actually 3 weeks as of today, me recording this, that the fixture would be played in double game week 25 for Liverpool. And actually last season, the Premier League, I don't know if they promised, but they suggested that they would try to give fans a minimum of 4 weeks for any rescheduled fixtures. If they wait any longer, it's going to be less than 3 weeks, then approaching 2 weeks. I don't think you can give fans 2 weeks notice for a game. So I would say, unless we have an announcement by Friday at 5 p.m, because sometimes they do wait until 5 p.m. If we don't have an announcement before Friday at 5 p.m, I would be very surprised if Liverpool do double in 25. And all of a sudden, that changes everything. Because Liverpool then go from being a team in demand because they have a double of Brentford and Luton in 25 to a team where we maybe don't want to own that many of their players. Because yes, they have Burnley in 24 and Brentford in 25. But they then blank in game week 26. They've got Man City in game week 28. And they're one of the teams that are most likely to blank in Game Week 29 as well. So obviously information around whether Liverpool do double or not will affect a lot of things. Like, do I feel like I need to hang on to Trent? Is Jota essential to bring in? Do I want to sell Darwin as the player to bring Haaland into my team? What do I do with Salah as well? Because obviously if Liverpool do double in 25, maybe I want to hang on to him on the chance that he's available for then. So we are really waiting for that announcement. And therefore this week in particular, I do want to wait until the last second possible, just in case we do get any information around whether that double goes ahead. If we don't get any information, I think we have to start planning for the fact that it's not going to happen. So that's going to affect all of us, and unfortunately, therefore, I can't give any concrete opinions on what my likely transfers or chip strategies likely to be. But on the other four midfielders, obviously Saka has been putting up pretty good underlying data for a while now. I've been talking about it, but players at that price, and just all players in general, they have to deliver on that data as well. So it was really nice to see him get that 10-pointer in Game Week 22. He needs to continue delivering at that price, though, because he is one of the players that allows you to bring Haaland and KDB into your team, because he's getting really expensive now. So I need more from him. I need that on a consistent basis. And therefore, he's still on the chopping block. Not because I think he's a bad player or a bad option, or that I don't think he'll continue to return, but you can't own everyone. And therefore, all players around that price need to be considered as potential sells to bring in other players that are performing well. So Saka is fine for this week. He's not on the chopping block right now, but I will continue to monitor how he's getting on with his actual output. Liverpool at home isn't a great fixture, but it is a home game, and we know how much better Arsenal and Saka are when playing at home. So I'm perfectly happy having him for this week. Yes, I know that Saka is playing against Trent, and in a second you'll see that Darwin is playing against Gabriel, but you sometimes can't avoid these things in FPL. So hopefully, fingers crossed, I'll get points from some of them. Richarlison against Everton away is obviously against his old club. I don't think this is a bad fixture, but for me, he's not really a captaincy shout, simply because it is away from home. And I also just feel like this is such a Richarlison fixture to just do something stupid. He loses his head a lot less often right now. He looks a little bit more sensible and mature, but I just worry Richarlison's going to lose his head in a game like this. But also, I just think away from home against Everton, that doesn't scream points to me. That feels like a fixture where he could get one, but he could also blank, and I don't think there's a chance for more than one. The Brentford game, as we saw by them putting 3 goals past them and accumulating quite a few chances, that felt like a chance for Richarlison to get more than one return. So I don't really like this game for captaincy, but he's fine, I think, as an option. Foden against Brentford away. Foden actually put up barely any expected goal involvement in Game Week 22. He struggled a little bit, and the reason for that, he was out wide for a lot of the game. And I do worry, there were some quotes coming out from Pep, I don't know if you saw them, which suggest that he doesn't like to really play with 2 high up the pitch 8s with just sort of Rodri just sat there in the team. He needs someone almost sat alongside Rodri doing some of the work. He spoke about the fact that Nunes does that quite well, which is why he obviously played in Game Week 22. He spoke about obviously Gundogan being so fantastic about that in recent seasons, which is the reason that obviously once KDB came in, Foden's been pushed out to the right, and then Nunes came in alongside De Bruyne. So alongside Rodri, I suppose, to allow De Bruyne to push on. So I just wonder, with De Bruyne starting, if he's going to start on a more consistent basis, does that mean that Pep is not going to be happy in most games to play both Foden and De Bruyne in those central roles? I don't know the answer to that. Maybe he is absolutely fine with it, but it does worry me slightly, because I'm not saying Foden is a bad option when pushed out to the right, or even if he's on the left. I don't think he'll be on the left. I think it'll be mainly on the right. But there's 2 issues with that. I think he'll get slightly less chances to score goals when he's pushed out wide, because sometimes the City wingers, especially if Kyle Walker's not playing, they do play quite wide. I think when Walker's playing, the right winger tends to drift in a little bit. So when Walker's back, if he's back soon, I assume, in the starting 11, then maybe Foden will come more central. But when he's out wide, less of a goal threat. And on top of that, unless Bernardo Silva is one of the players playing centrally, I think he's then competing with Bernardo Silva for the right. So I just worry a little bit that Foden's minutes might be a little bit less secure. And even if his minutes aren't less secure, let's say that he still continues to start every game, I just worry that his goal threat will be down a little bit. So I don't think he's a sell. I actually still think he's fine as a purchase, given the fact that City definitely have a double in 25 and they don't blank in 26. But I just don't think he's as good of an option as he was when we knew he was playing central and we knew he was getting 90 minutes every game. So that's my only slight concern around Foden. And he did come off slightly early in the Burnley game too. The final player in my midfield is Cole Palmer, who currently has the armband. I don't feel particularly great about this, because Wolves do just randomly turn it on at different points defensively. They are slightly better at Molineux, but it just feels like on paper one of the better fixtures in my team. We know that Palmer at home is better than he is away from home. We know Chelsea are better at home as well. And his data does continue to be pretty strong. We know that he is still probably on penalties, some set pieces, and given the fact that there aren't many other standout options, unless I decide to bring in Haaland and give him the armband, I'm currently probably looking at Cole Palmer for captain. I would love to know what you think down below, who are you currently planning to captain, but he might be the standout option, or one of the standout options, if we don't feel fully comfortable that Haaland's going to start and we don't want to bring him in and or give him the armband. So that's the current midfield. I am likely to sell Salah this week if we don't get a positive update around him, and I want to also buy Haaland because it's the most direct route. And if we don't get a double game week announcement, we don't get a positive update on Salah, what am I keeping him for? I'm keeping him for a double that doesn't look like it's as likely to happen. And I'm keeping him even though if there is a double, he might not even be available for that double because he's injured. So I feel like at that point, you're holding Salah beyond the point where it starts to make sense. So that's the situation of the midfield. When we look at replacements for Salah, I'll do that in my watch list section. But let's move on to the 3 forwards and then look at my team in its entirety. So very briefly, we're going to take a look at my 3 forwards before looking at my watch list, my AI recommended transfers, and then basically all of the possible routes that I have back to Haaland. And I'd like your help in that section because I'd like you to tell me what you think my easiest and best route back to Haaland is. Do I just sell Salah? Do I look to lose Trent? Or is it a combination of players for maybe a -4 hit? The 3 forwards is an interesting situation because I don't really have a massive issue with Watkins, Alvarez, or Darwin. If you told me I had to keep this front line for the next 5 or 6 weeks, I'd say, do you know what? That's absolutely fine. I have no issue. They've got a mixed bag of fixtures, but they all have decent fixtures at some point. They're all actually returning for me at various points as well. They all returned in game week 22, although Darwin obviously missed the penalty as well, but I don't actually mind any of them. My issue, I suppose, is that the 2 players that I kind of most want to bring in at the moment is Ivan Toney and Erling Haaland. And obviously Haaland being the big one, given it is Haaland, and he has a pretty nice double in game week 25. So I do want to bring in both those, but I also don't really desperately want to lose any of my 3 forwards. So what it comes down to is, do I want to bring in both Toney and Haaland? And if so, I've got to lose at least 2 of my forwards, maybe even all 3, and move to a 3-5-2 formation. And then like, which 2 do I sell? Because each of them, you could justify selling all of them, but you could also justify keeping all of them. Watkins, maybe not returning the amount you would need for his price, maybe blanking in 29. Aston Villa have lost form. He's not on penalties. You could give all of these reasons, but he continues to return, and you have to say his point scoring across the season has been exceptionally strong. And with the fixtures that they've got coming up, it does feel like the kind of transfer which could really backfire. You give all of these reasons to sell Watkins, and he is expensive, but then he just continuously returns and just damages your rank. So that doesn't feel great, removing Watkins ahead of their fixture run coming up. But then Alvarez and Darwin, I mean, I've complained about them for a while now. I've owned Alvarez since game week 6, and I've owned Darwin since game week 8. So I've owned them for most of the season. They have been frustrating at points, but they are finally starting to return for me now. Alvarez has a confirmed double in 25, and yes, we expect his minutes to be a lot lower probably with KDB and Haaland fully fit, but are they going to start every game? As I said in the intro part of the video, I don't know if they both are. And even if they do both start every game, is Alvarez going to be the one to sit on the bench? Could you not envision a world where it is Alvarez, KDB, and Haaland in a team? I don't think that's particularly likely, but maybe Pep cooks something up because Alvarez's performance has been really, really good in the last few game weeks, and it feels crazy to bench him off the back of that. I mean, even today, getting a brace in the first half. Pep does often bench players that are playing well, but it just doesn't feel very likely at the moment. So I wonder, is now the time to be selling Alvarez? Is he going to get significant minutes over the next few game weeks and going into double game week 25? And it kind of makes the most sense logically. If you're going to bring Erling Haaland in, you remove the player that has been playing in Haaland's position. That kind of feels obvious, but at the same time, Alvarez can play in midfield, and we just don't know how many minutes Haaland and De Bruyne are going to be going to get. So then begs the question, do we even bother moving for Haaland? Like, do we even need to sell Alvarez? Do I just keep Alvarez until he's dropped? That kind of feels a little bit passive sometimes, but often I feel like we try and move a little bit too early. People that moved for Haaland this week, it was too early. We all kind of accepted it was a bit early and that he was just going to get a few minutes off the bench. Do I just wait for the moment that Haaland starts and Alvarez is benched to bring Haaland in? But then at that point, if Haaland starts a game and I don't own him and everyone's captained him, that can be enough to really damage your rank. So it's a tricky one of moving but not moving too early. And I suppose kind of an in-between them, rather than removing Alvarez for Haaland, is if I do want to move for Haaland, maybe just to kind of just put a bit of a safety net around it, I do bring Haaland in, but Alvarez isn't the one to leave. And I just keep the 2 of them. And then I'll pretty much guarantee to have, well, I am guaranteed to have the number 9 starting for Man City. And I've got the option there that if Haaland doesn't start every game, or if Alvarez starts in midfield, I at least have the 2 of them. So it's almost like a bit of a, like I said, like a safety blanket. It maybe isn't the best idea, but it just gives me a little bit more peace about bringing Haaland in. I'm not so sure about selling Alvarez before the double. Maybe Foden, Haaland, and Alvarez is the best City triple up ahead of double game week 25. So I'm not 100% sure about selling Alvarez. And then Darwin, he's really been performing well recently. I know Game Week 22 was very, very frustrating, missing the penalty, hitting the woodwork 4 times, but he's getting so many chances. He's accumulated over 1 XGI in the last 3 games in a row, which is just ridiculous. And they've got, obviously, a great fixture in 24 against Burnley. They've got Brentford in 25 guaranteed. They may also have Luton in there as a double game week. If the double game week isn't announced by the Game Week 23 deadline, then maybe it makes it a little bit easier to sell Darwin. But just in general, as with Alvarez and Watkins, I don't feel particularly comfortable selling Darwin. But I have decisions to make because I think arguably Tony is better than all 3 of them when you consider that he doubles in 25, plays in 26, and plays in 29. And given that he is just an excellent forward, and I also want Haaland. So tough decisions need to be made. But that is the way that the team is currently looking for Game Week 23. Let's now take a look at what my possible routes back to Haaland are and the players that I might be bringing in into my team. So guys, this section is going to be a little bit more kind of relaxed, more like a live stream, just to take you through the possible transfer plans that I have, because if I do want to bring Haaland back in, I have various routes that I can go with my team, which will affect me in the future. Obviously, the players that I sell will be difficult to bring them back in. So it isn't just as straightforward as saying just sell Salah, because there are other ways to do it. And if Salah is available for 24 and or 25 and Liverpool do get the double, then maybe selling Salah isn't the best idea. So we're going to take you through all of those. And apologies, by the way, if you've heard any background noise throughout today's video. I live in the middle of the city centre and it is extremely loud tonight. It's currently, just a timestamp, 2 a.m. and I'm releasing this in 5 hours, and it's just been incredibly loud, so I do apologise for that. So, if I'm going to take you through the straightforward transfer, if Haaland isn't a player that I want to bring in for Game Week 23, I think I will probably do it, but given the fact that he didn't get that many minutes, and in all honesty, I don't think he looked that great. He had 8 touches and 0 shots on target after coming on. Maybe there's a world in which I just choose to go without again for Game Week 23. If that's the case, I've got 2 options. I can either sell Salah and just use one of my moves to get closer to bringing in Haaland, because if I sell Salah, I can do Haaland in 1 move in 24, and then I've still got another free transfer. So that's one possibility. But the other possibility is just sorting out my defence a bit. Let's say that we get another negative update on Pau Torres and Charlie Taylor. Maybe removing one of them makes the most sense. Pau Torres would make the most sense because at the moment his injury looks worse, and also he's more expensive. And the thing that I do like about Charlie Taylor is that in the 2 blank game weeks coming up, blank game week 26 and blank game week 29, he's got a fixture in both of them and they're not terrible. So when I have to rely on him, which I will in both blank game weeks, you'll need all of your players pretty much. I feel like he's not an awful player if he's going to be available for them. But the thing is, Burnley are just so rubbish. I don't think there's a world in which I really want to play Charlie Taylor in any fixture, especially given in game week 29, we'll probably be buying and captaining Tony for that fixture against Burnley. So maybe Charlie Taylor would be the one to sell. I think I would keep it fairly cheap still, and I think I'd be looking at something like Van Heck, even though he's unlikely to play in 29. So I'm removing a player because obviously he plays against Man City. In fact, it's almost guaranteed that Brighton Man City won't be going ahead in blank game week 29, but it gives me just a much better player for this run here, even when I need them. In game week 23, straight away, he may come into my starting 11 for me. So maybe that's a transfer I make. But let's say that I want to bring Haaland back in. I don't think making a defensive transfer, unless it's selling Trent, makes a lot of sense. But let me start with that, because that really is a possibility. Let's say I want to hang on to Salah, or let's say for some reason I think Trent's going to be benched again, or I think this is the best route. If I sell Trent, I can actually sell any of my forwards and bring in Haaland in 2 moves. So Alvarez is the cheapest. Let's say I commit to selling Alvarez because I think that's the most straightforward transfer. I then have 4 million to replace Trent. And again, Van Heck at 4 million. I mean, I could go for Connor Bradley, by the way, but I don't think it'll be starting on a consistent basis, at least at the time of me recording. I don't think so. It probably would be Van Heck at 4 million. I have exactly the money to do that. I'm hoping that Van Heck and Haaland don't go up on Thursday or Friday night if I decide to wait to make those transfers. So that's a possibility there. I can actually keep Salah, get Haaland, but I would be losing Trent. The thing is, most people, though, and rightly so, would say that probably doesn't make much sense given Salah is injured, Salah's very expensive, and also Trent isn't injured, and Trent seems to be a fine option at the moment, assuming that he goes back into the starting 11. And I kind of back that. This maybe feels like trying to overthink it slightly. So maybe the idea is just to sell Salah. If I want to sell Salah, I have up to 8.4, and obviously a lot of people have been moving for, it's Diogo, isn't it? I keep typing in Jota. Oh, I'm on Defenders. What nightmare. So Diogo Jota coming in makes the most sense. I have enough money to do that. But again, if Liverpool don't have the double announced for 25, I don't think I would go there because they don't have a double. I'm bringing another player that blanks in 26. So that probably wouldn't be the transfer I make unless, if the double is announced, by the time if you're watching this, it may well have been, then Jota are coming in for Salah and then Haaland in for Alvarez. I'm basically switching around my Man City and Liverpool assets, but that makes the most sense in my head. If it isn't Diogo Jota, though, because let's say that double isn't announced, there's a few different options we've got here. De Bruyne is obviously an option. I could do that, but I would then have to make another transfer to do so, which maybe isn't the worst idea. That would give me De Bruyne, Foden, and Haaland for double game week 25. So I have in my mind, if I want to do that, it would be basically selling Saka, Watkins, or Trent as well for a -4 hit, downgrading them and finding the money. Which, again, maybe isn't the worst idea in the world. I quite like the idea of that. The other option is I just go for a cheaper player, and then I would actually have the money in the bank to do some other things with my team. For example, I guess Elise and Eze, if they are confirmed as being fit before the deadline, could be options. Anthony Gordon's about to go on a really nice run from Game Week 23 onwards. He could be playing as the number 9, which I don't necessarily think is a great thing for him, but he's pretty much guaranteed minutes at the moment with the way that he's been playing and also the injuries that Newcastle have. I could still go for Jared Bowen. Jared Bowen could be a decent option, which I'll actually quickly show you right now if we just move over to Fantasy Football Hub. Jared Bowen is my suggested transfer in according to the AI. So Salah to Bowen and Darwin to Haaland is the AI recommended transfers. There is a link down below in the description, by the way, if you want to get your own AI recommended transfers. But if we switch back over to the official fantasy site. So I have lots of options there. Bowen, we could go for, I don't know, Garnacho if we feel like we want to offer the route to get back to Salah in another spot in the future. I could go for another Man City mid, Bernardo, Doku. There are a number of options here. I don't know exactly what I would go for at the moment. I would imagine it would probably be Diogo Jota if the double's announced. And if it's not, I have a feeling that it would either be Bowen and Palace midfielder, Gordon, or I do make the De Bruyne move and then just I need to find 2.3 million. But then I would have a really nice City triple up. So that's the possibility at the moment. The other final route, if I don't want to sell Trent, let's say I don't want to sell Salah because the double gets announced and he looks like he might be back. It's basically selling, if I just bring Haaland back into that spot there, it's basically selling one of Saka or Watkins. I would then probably also, if I want to do it for Alvarez rather than Darwin, it would probably have to be either, let's just say, Saka to a 4.4, or if it's Watkins, it's another transfer required, right? Because I can't go down to 3.9. So Saka makes the most sense in that position, but I don't really want to lose Saka particularly. So I kind of feel like it probably does need to be Salah that's sold. The only other possibility is if I don't do it for Alvarez. So if I don't do it for Alvarez and I actually do it, I don't know, directly for Ollie Watkins, I could sell Saka and Watkins quite comfortably, right? So it would be Saka, Watkins down like that, and then Saka to 5.7. I've got enough money for someone even like a Neto. Maybe that's the best way to sell both Saka and Watkins and keep Salah, Trent, and Darwin and Alvarez. You can see that there are so many combinations to do this, but I think basically if I was to narrow it down to the most likely things to happen at the moment, if I put my team back to how it is, it's either Pau Torres or Charlie Taylor to another defender just to sort out my defence a bit. It's then either probably Salah and one of my forwards to Haaland and a midfielder of my choice. Maybe KDB, but then I'd have to take the -4. Or it would be a forward and Saka being sold to keep Salah, and then I would have to go pretty cheap with that midfield spot. I would love to know what you think you're going to do with Haaland and what you think I should do. Most likely, if I do want to bring in Haaland, it's going to be Salah that's sold. And then I just have to work out if I want to bring Salah back in, how on earth I plan on doing that. But the longer that goes on without this double being announced, the longer that goes on without having an update, a positive update, beyond just the fact that he's been jogging and doing a little bit of training on Salah, the more I think it probably makes sense to just sell Salah and get Haaland the easy way. Let me know what you think down below in the comments. So guys, there we have it. That is my Game Week 23 team selection. A bit of a tight turnaround. So if you do appreciate this video coming out straight away for you to get your FPL fix, then do make sure you drop a like on the video. Make sure to subscribe as well. I do really appreciate the support. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.